Good morning. Welcome to Conversations at the Corner. This is episode 80. We are at the end of July. It's been a great month as we have kind of celebrated the country's 250th birthday, and we've taken in these questions. And so, Pastor Nathan, we have one more episode, one more week left. And so here is the question of the day. This is a little bit more of a serious question today. We have a lot of fun and all that, but this is a serious one.
Okay.
Well, I guess it can be. I guess you could make it funny or goofy if you want, but I kind of wrote it as a serious one. Here it is. What is your favorite thing about being an American?
So I will pause to say that I have lived overseas twice. So once in Canada and once in Bolivia. Mm-hmm. And I think it is hard to kind of, I think, truly appreciate where you're from until you've actually spent significant time somewhere else, because we don't really know the differences.
Yep.
We don't really know. I think goodness, this is a tough question. What do I appreciate about it? I think what I appreciate, so I'm just going to contrast this with Bolivia a little bit. And listen, like the people who are there, they're used to this.
Right.
So it may not occur to them that this would be a thing. But there are elements of our society that I think we take for granted, and especially like, this might surprise some people, like regulatory elements. So what I mean by that is in Bolivia, where we lived in La Paz, it's La Paz and El Alto are the two cities that are right next to each other. And combined, they're about 3 million people. But they don't have a proper water treatment there.
Oh, wow.
So when you're living in a place like that, the water is full of E. coli and just nasty stuff like that. So a lot of people either drink Coke and then their teeth get rotted out, or they buy like the water cooler type things that you can have put in your home.
Yep.
We had a filtration system that we brought with us, actually, and that was pretty helpful. But there are a lot of other things, like traffic. They don't have good traffic regulation. Pharmaceuticals are not very well regulated. You can go and get pretty much anything you want.
Okay.
In some ways that's nice, because then if you know you need something, you can go get it. But
less hoops to jump through.
But in other cases, it's like, well, it's also good because sometimes drugs need to be regulated because they are very powerful.
Yeah.
Or they can be addictive or things like that. So not that this is unique to America, because there are other countries that would have regulations on water and drugs and traffic and different things like that. But being in a place in the West where you feel like I know what I'm doing. Like when I drive, I know what I'm doing. When I go to a drugstore, I know when I have to pick up a prescription, or if I do think I need a drug, I might go to a doctor and actually figure that out first, and then I can feel better about it. But I will say that when I was in Bolivia and I was teaching high school students, I mentioned about drugstores was actually kind of interesting. When they heard that I had to go like get a prescription and do all this stuff, they were appalled at the idea. They were like, no, we want to be able to make our own health decisions. Like we don't want to have to go through all this, so for them, what I had to go through was annoying and frustrating.
And at times it is for us too.
And it is. There are times when it is. But for me, it was like, no, this is actually probably good. Not that it's 100% perfect, but it's good because I can be assured that the drugs are safe, that they probably are going to match a diagnosis. There's some regulation in there. And it's not just totally up to me. Yeah. So I guess I appreciate that. I don't know if that's the answer that everybody wants me to give. Obviously, we have freedoms, the right to free speech and religion and different things like that. We're not the only country that has that, but we are kind of like the foregrounding of those types of countries in the world today. So that's something that I appreciate too.
Yeah. Let me ask you this. That's a great answer. I was not expecting that. But the water situation. So do people bathe in like gross, nasty E. coli filled water?
Yeah, you kind of have to. Now that you don't really have much of a choice over.
So your water filtration system was only for your drinking water or cooking or whatever.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, and that was tough because when we were in Bolivia, Wallace, when we left, Wallace was 3.5, and Graham was a year and a half old. So you want to bathe your kids at that age, they're going to drink the water. You know what I mean? Like you can tell them to not do it, but they're 3, you know what I mean, or 2 or whatever. So one thing that's kind of fascinating is that Wallace, he went to a Bolivian daycare. He drank that water in the bathtub. That boy does not get sick. I think he rolled around in so much insanity for those first few years of his life, so many germs, so much stuff, that his immune system is crazy. Like I literally don't think I can remember the last time he's been sick.
Wow.
It's been years.
That's Wallace, you said, right?
Yeah, Wallace.
Now, was Graham born down there?
Graham was born down there.
In Bolivia.
He doesn't get sick very often either. He will sometimes get these really strong, like, colds and things like that, but neither of them get sick a lot. Now, I don't think it's great to like give your kids E. coli or anything like that. Right. But
let's be clear here.
That was a side benefit, I guess.
Okay, cool. Well, that's a great answer and something that a lot of people I think don't think about. But your experience, you're right. Until you've lived there, you don't know.
Yeah, and I think that's part of it. I mean, all the things that I've mentioned. Even the freedoms, those freedoms do exist in other countries. It's not like if I move to another country, I'm going to automatically lose those things. But that's a benefit that we have and we are used to. And so,
Well, and that was going to be my answer, freedom. I mean, just kind of in general, the freedom we have, but all the different freedoms that we have. And then just the fact that, you know, I'm not a rich person by any stretch of the imagination.
Right.
But compared to a majority of the rest of the world, even people who are like middle class here, or maybe even people who live in poverty here, are richer than a majority of the world. And that's just a blessing that we don't really think about. So that's what I would say. So once again, happy birthday, America. Thankful to be an American. And God has blessed us. And it's time for America to bless God in return. So this is the last week of our questions series. And we saved a humdinger for last, didn't we?
Yeah. So the person who wrote this question, I know who they are, but they didn't want to be mentioned, so that's fine. It was essentially like a 3-parter, and there's a lot to cover here. We're going to try to cover this in a really general way, and I will say for right now that one of the reasons I want to cover this in a general way is that I don't feel like I'm an expert on this particular subject. So I really hesitate to kind of get on here and say a bunch of stuff. But I've got a couple of points that I think are important.
Okay.
So here is the question. So I'm going to list all 3 parts to the question right now, and then we'll kind of hit them one by one.
Perfect.
So basically, the first question is, what is anti-Semitism and why does it exist? Like, what is anti-Semitism? Why does it exist? We'll talk about that in a moment. So then, why is there a lot of fighting like in Israel and Palestine right now? Like, what's the deal with that? What's the problem?
That's question number 2.
That's the second part. And the third part then is, why are university students kind of like riled up about this and protesting it sometimes? Like, what's that all about? Okay. So this person has kind of these 3 questions. So I'm going to go one by one.
Let's go.
The easiest one is, what is anti-Semitism? It's very simple. It's just, it's basically racism, but with Jews in mind.
Okay.
Like, I am racist, but particularly toward Jewish people. A person...
Anti-Jew.
Right.
Is what that
anti-Jewish person. And so... where does that come from, I think, is the more interesting question. Because anytime you have a prejudice against anybody, like whether it might be a white person against black people, you could the question you want to ask is like, where does that come from? Why? And a lot of times it's irrational. Ultimately, it's not logically rational.
Sometimes it's handed down from generations. You don't even know why.
Yeah. So sometimes you get that. But this one is actually kind of an interesting question, and I wanted to tackle it from an angle that I don't think most people would expect. But actually, the history of Christianity is one of the big places where anti-Semitism has taken hold. There's been a number of prominent church figures over the years who have basically not liked Jewish people. Some of that comes from a reading of the New Testament where it's like Jewish people killed Jesus, right? They're the enemies of Christians. They're this type of thing. So there's a lot of people who have had this attitude towards Jewish people, like we just don't like them, period, because of some of that type of stuff. Now, I think they're misreading the Bible pretty badly. But the one figure that I'll mention is Martin Luther. Martin Luther is the basic figurehead of the Protestant Reformation, one of the most important figures in Christian history and really even in world history. And he wrote some horrible things about Jewish people. He had whole entire tracts about the Jews and their lies and all this type of stuff. So that's actually something that I think Christians need to be aware of. I'm not saying that, I didn't grow up. I grew up in the church, and I don't remember anybody ever saying anything like that. But that is something that comes about even within Christian circles for reasons that I find difficult to understand. But another place that it might come from is in Europe before World War II. There was a lot of anti-Semitism in Europe. And some of that is really about stereotypes, like, the Jews all own the banks, right? And so they're puppet masters of society because they own all the money and the capital and stuff like that. It was true that there were a lot of Jewish people in banking, so that wasn't wrong. But of course, they don't control society.
Yeah, to jump to they control society.
They don't control society. But another part of it in Europe, especially prior to World War II, and who knows, maybe even now, a lot of it had to do with Jewish people they didn't have a homeland of their own. And so they had been dispersed across Europe. So they were really the foreigners wherever they were at, whether they were in Germany or France or Poland or wherever they weren't native to that land. And so, as can happen a lot of times, sometimes a country, when it has problems, can blame all of its problems on these people who are in here. Well, it's not that, and so, I guess basically to say that was something that was happening all over the place in Europe leading up to World War II. Germany just had probably the craziest expression of that anti-Semitism. It wasn't that other countries or people didn't have it. But that was part of the problem. It's easy. Sometimes when a country is going through a problem, you find a scapegoat. Oh, it's all because of these people.
Yeah.
And then you kind of make up this idea that they are horrible and they're rodents and they're vile and we got to get rid of them, like that type of stuff. So that can happen. So those are some of a really brief element of the origins of it.
No, I think that's good. I think it shed some light on some things for me that I didn't know. So
I think with almost all forms of racism, it's based on stereotypes. And those stereotypes are sometimes based in a sliver of reality. But then what we do is we make that stereotype the whole person. That person is Jewish, so that must mean they're crooked and greedy and miserly. Well, okay, I'm sure there are some Jewish people who are miserly, but I know some white folks who aren't Jewish who are miserly too. You know what I mean? So what we do is then we make that characteristic that's all Jewish people are like that. Well,
I don't have a problem with stereotypes because they're largely true and they're kind of funny, but when you lump everybody into that stereotype of whatever, that's when it becomes a problem.
Right.
Let me throw something at you and you tell me if this is correct.
Oh. See if I know.
Would you say that the very first expression of anti-Semitism was in Egypt with the Jews?
Yeah, that's possible.
With the Hebrews?
I don't know. I don't know if it would be the very first. It's probably the first recorded.
Okay. Yeah, maybe that's fair. First recorded.
Yeah. And the interesting thing about that passage, I don't have it right in front of me, but when they had come into Egypt and they had grown, there were pharaohs who knew them and understood them. And then they had this new pharaoh who didn't know them. Yep. And he felt
he was afraid.
Yeah, I'm not sure what these people are going to do. Yep. We got to take care of them,
Because there was, what was there, more than 1 million of them? Right?
Yeah. So they're looking at that as a societal problem. All of our problems are with these Jewish people, so we got to enslave them or we're going to do all this.
And I think we can go back to Joseph being in Egypt and then Jacob and the brothers and family coming during the famine and then I think just staying. That's how they got to Egypt to begin with, right?
Right. Yep.
Yeah. And then like you said, the new Pharaoh came in, was scared. There were a lot of Hebrews. What are we going to do with them?
Yep.
Let's make them work for us. We don't want them to overtake us. So maybe you're right. Maybe that's not the very first, but that's the first recorded. But I kind of trace it back to that point in history.
It could be. And the principle involved is not Okay, I'll give Bolivia as an example. So when we lived in Bolivia, the main, like, this might surprise people. Bolivia is in South America, but the main source of racism that you had down there actually was Bolivian people hated Chinese people.
It's so random.
But it's not. It is if you don't know anything
That's
about
true.
the country.
Yeah.
But,
And I don't.
But what happens is China has had a habit over the past 20, 30 years of going into poorer countries and buying up assets and industries and things like that, and then controlling them. And it's not always in a good way. So then what happens is you have actually a lot of Chinese nationals in Bolivia.
Okay.
And so the native Bolivian people are kind of like, oh my goodness, like you're taking all our stuff, you're kind of buying up our wealth and all that type of stuff. So on the one hand, it is some of China's policies there are pretty frustrating and understandably so. But that can grow into, well, anytime I see a Chinese person, they're horrible.
Yep.
I can't, no, that's not true. Like those people are not necessarily your enemy.
Right.
So that principle, the idea that like this foreign person, it's a person I don't really understand, they're causing all of our problems. And again, sometimes there can be a speck of truth to it, but you have to be careful. You can't.
Any time in our house, anything comes up about a nationality or a race or a political position or any of those, this is what I tell Brady. There is good and bad of everything and everyone.
Yeah.
There are a lot of good white people and there's a lot of bad white people.
Yeah.
There's a lot of good black people. There's a lot of bad black people.
Yeah.
There's, Bolivians. There's a lot of great Bolivians. There's a lot of bad Bolivians. It doesn't,
yeah.
It goes across the board. There's good and bad of both. So we can't say all of one thing is good or all of one thing is bad because there's enough to go around.
Yeah. And I think the tendency in a lot of these instances is to think my tribe is all good. Well, not always.
Yeah.
And we should, and Christians to me should really understand if we have a healthy doctrine of sin, everybody sins. So you don't get to say my particular group is really amazing. No, that's not how it works. Everybody sins.
You're right. And there are even some within the Wesleyan tribe of Christianity that I don't agree with, or I would differ with on certain things. So, absolutely. Well, good. That's a good starting point.
Okay. So the second question is more about current events. And so this question is about like, why is there a conflict? I'm going to lump these two together sort of just to save us a little bit of time. But why is there a conflict between Israel and Palestine? What's going on with that? And then why are university students protesting?
And when you get into Israel-Palestine, if you know, which you may not, talk about how long this conflict has been going on.
Okay, so there's a couple of different ways to look at this. So we could really kind of go all the way back to biblical times if we wanted to. We could say that Abraham and Isaac and Ishmael, there's kind of like a breaking apart of these different tribes and children and where they settle, and they always conflict with each other. So that is true, that those kind of differences are centuries old between these different groups and different tribes. Now, the modern conflict, or kind of the way you're going to have to think about it now, is this. So if you go back to what I was talking about before World War II, all these Jewish people don't have a proper homeland. Palestine, which is where Israel is now, was kind of colonized by Britain. At the end of World War II, Britain was going to give up control of that area. So what you had in that area was largely like Palestinians or Arab people. And so when Britain did this, there's a bunch of different things that are going to go on to this, but I'm just going to try to super simplify this for our audience.
Good.
The super simplification is that at that time, Israel was granted a parcel of land that is modern day Israel now. But you've got the problem now of all these Jewish people coming back to their homeland, but these Palestinians who had been there for a long time too. So essentially you have these two people groups who are laying claim to the land, all right? And so then basically over time, the Palestinians are granted different areas which are basically overseen by Israel. There have been various attempts throughout history to have like a two-state solution, like one in the land that would be just for Palestinians and one that would be for the Israelites. But that has never really worked out, again, for all sorts of different complex reasons that I don't have the time to go into. And I don't really have the historical knowledge necessarily to give you a breakdown of how that works. But essentially, I think it's important to remember that a lot of the reason that that's happening is a conflict over the land.
Okay.
Now, if you want to telescope backwards again into biblical times, the same thing is happening biblically. The Israelites, after they have an exodus from Egypt and they go out into the wilderness, there are Canaanites that are in that land. And so God is saying, I'm going to give that land over to you, and we're going to move the Canaanites out.
Which is the promised land.
Which is the promised land. And Israel has their time of the monarchy, and then there's an exile. And when they go into exile, Assyria and Babylon have control over that land. And then eventually the Greeks do for a while, or the Persians, and then the Greeks and the Romans do. So that land in particular has always been fought over. Like who has control over it, how it's governed. That's really not particularly new. Now, of course, you could probably say that of most any place on earth, but that place in particular has had a lot of power control shifting. I'm not even getting into the fact that Muslims have, had for centuries controlled that under the Ottoman Empire. There's different things like that have gone on. So the modern conflict ultimately is about who has the right to be in this place. And that has become complex, of course, because the Palestinians had, I can't remember exactly when, they elected kind of a Hamas government. Hamas is a terrorist organization, so they'll try to attack Israel. Israel will try to defend itself, and they kind of go back and forth and back and forth and back and forth and back and forth. This is the really simple, elementary school level version of this conflict.
Which is still super complex.
Right, it's still super complex. So basically, that's what's going on. Now, why are university students protesting, or why have they in some cases? So I want to do something really quick here before I even answer this question. I want to say two things. So when I criticize, let's say I criticize Russia, okay? Let's say I don't like the fact that they invaded Ukraine. Now, does that automatically, I think that all Russians are bad? No. I don't. I could criticize that policy, but still think, Russian people, they're great. I don't like their government maybe, or I don't like what they did, but I don't hate them as a people per se.
Right.
So I do think we need to make sure that we have a difference between somebody who is criticizing Israel's policies, maybe they don't like some of their policies, that is different from anti-Semitism. Now, sometimes they go hand in hand.
Yep.
Sometimes both things are happening at the same time, but they are not necessarily the same. Okay, so I could have a problem with France or whatever they do in France. I love French people are cool. You know what I mean? I like some of their art. I've been to France. I think it's a cool place to be. Having a problem with a country's policy or their governance is just not the same as racial prejudice necessarily.
Yeah, with their people and culture.
Right.
And all that. Yep.
So I think that's one distinction I think is important to make. The other distinction that I want to make too is this. In the evangelical world that I grew up in, basically our view and understanding is that Israel is God's chosen people. Now, they may not be following Jesus, okay, right? But they are God's chosen people. So I think that what that does is that gives people a lot of pause to criticize them. We're very hesitant. We don't want to criticize. They're God's people. God has blessed them. He's going to bless them, that sort of thing. Here's my argument, and so I don't know if people listening will like this argument or not. Maybe they will, maybe they won't. My argument is that it is actually fine to criticize Israel, and here is why I say that. Most good portions of the Old Testament criticize Israel. Right,
stiff-necked people.
Right. If you read the prophets, for instance, I'm teaching the prophets right now. We did a whole thing on the prophets last week. Most of that is directed toward Israel. It's saying, hey, you guys are worshiping false gods. Hey, you guys have bad economic practices. Hey, you're getting divorced all the time. All of that stuff is, and it's not that God hates Jewish people in some anti-Semitic way.
Yep.
It's, no, you're actually doing something wrong. And so we need to recognize that even if you are God's people, you can still do wrong things.
Yeah.
And so I would say that the modern day state of Israel, even though I do believe that Jewish people are God's chosen people, they are capable of doing wrong things. And this goes back to what I said earlier. If we have a healthy doctrine of sin, we believe that everybody can sin. So we believe that the chosen people of God, Israelites, can sin. And they can sin individually or they can sin as a government. Those things are all very possible. So to me, I think we have at least the grounding to when they do things that are wrong, that's okay to say that that's wrong. That doesn't mean you have to hate Israel or anything like that. It doesn't mean you're anti-Semitic. But those are 2 points that I think are important to kind of put out there. Now, for the university students, I think there are times when they have kind of an innate anti-Semitic stance.
Definitely.
There are times when that is happening.
And they're protesting and they don't even know why.
And sometimes they do, but sometimes that is the case. But at the other end of the spectrum, I think it is important to remember that we have, especially in this war between Israel and Palestine, or the Gaza stuff that's gone on recently, it is obviously correct for Israel to be able to defend itself. Like that's not a problem. And I think that for me, that's easy to say. I don't know what the university students will say. I'm not going to pretend to know what they would say about that statement. But there are also instances where even in the defense of that country, they could go too far. We talked about, I think it was a couple of episodes ago, where we were talking about, it was actually the first episode in July, where we were talking about war. And we recognize there's rules of engagement. You don't shoot schools or you don't shoot hospitals and blow them up, right? Because there's a humanitarian element to that we've kind of set up, right? So there have been at times some credible reports that Israel maybe is blocking humanitarian aid into parts of Gaza, where the Red Cross or organizations like that want to go in and bring in food or water and things like that, and Israel is blocking it. Now, some people have argued that maybe Hamas is actually doing it, or this or that or whatever. But if you're working from the position that Israel, in defending itself, is going too far by at times blocking humanitarian aid and doing things like that, it makes sense to say, yeah, that's wrong. If that is the case, and if they are doing that, then that is wrong. And so I think that is probably where a lot of protesters are coming from. And again, I think Israel has the right to defend itself. So I don't think it's like that. But I think that we got to understand that if as a secular nation, they can do wrong things, this is a wrong thing that they could do. And if they do it, then people have every reason to say, hey, that's wrong. You know what I mean? So I think that's probably where a lot of university students come from. And again, there are times when it does cross over into genuine anti-Semitism.
Yeah.
I can even point to you, some people might not know this, but there have been instances of, like in the arts world, nobody knows this, but so there's this famous band named Radiohead, if you've heard of them, right? You might not have heard their music, but their guitarist, his name is Johnny Greenwood. He has recently worked with some Israeli composers and musicians and stuff like that. And there are some people who have gotten mad at him because he worked with those Israeli musicians and composers. And Greenwood, I think, would probably be way more liberal in his view of Israel and Palestine, but his stance is like, well, no, like, I know these people, they're good musicians, so sometimes people can critique that is anti-Semitism. Like, you got a problem with this guy just because he's working with Israelites? No, come on, that's silly. So I think sometimes it can cross over, but this is a thorny topic that I'm not an expert on.
But you had the courage to tackle it.
Yeah, maybe there's always that line between like bravery and stupidity.
Courageousness and foolishness, right?
And I took this on, and I will say, like, I'm more than willing to be corrected if somebody listening thinks that something I've said is wrong or I've misunderstood a certain aspect of the conflict. It is not an area of expertise for me.
Yeah.
It just isn't.
And probably it's not an area that any of us know a ton about because we hear portions and media slants and all of this. And so to know the truth of the matter
Can be difficult.
Can be very difficult. Yep. So, Pastor Nathan, anything else you want to add to that?
I probably have already gotten myself into enough trouble.
we're gonna stop.
I'll stop here.
Okay. All right. Well, I will just close by saying this: the Israelites are God's chosen people. They have been since the covenant with Abraham. They will be until Jesus returns. I think what your point, Pastor Nathan, of even though they are God's chosen people, they can still do wrong and make wrong choices and sinful choices. Same as Christians. Like we as Christians still have the freedom to make dumb choices or sinful choices. And it's about coming back to the place of repentance and restoration with Jesus. But thank you for tackling this topic, this discussion. Thank you for the one who submitted the questions.
Yeah, you know who you are.
So hopefully some good information was given.
Yeah.
Thank you guys for submitting the questions throughout the month of July.
Yeah, I always enjoy this.
Yeah, we got to as many of them as we could, and if you submitted a question we didn't get to it, we do apologize for that. But we'll plan to do it again next year, and we'll be thinking about your questions that you can submit, and in 11 months we'll have your opportunity. So let's pray before we dismiss. Lord Jesus, thank you for this day and this time. God, thank you for your covenant with Abraham, your covenant with Israel. And God, we do stand with Israel. God, we stand with your people. And Lord, we pray that they would be led by you as we in the United States would be led by you and in countries across the world. God, I pray that there would be a spiritual awakening of Christ-likeness, awakening of Jesus in nations around the world. And God, thank you for our listeners today. I pray that you would be with them and help them. And may they stand for truth and righteousness no matter what. In Jesus' name, amen. Same time, same channel next week. New topic. Keep rolling, Emmanuel.